Welcome to the CMO Spotlight. And today I'm here with Joe De Sena, who is the founder and CEO of Spartan. Welcome, Joe.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, Joe, as a fellow Joe. So I wondered if we could start by you telling us a little bit about Spartan, the organization. I know there's some sub brands that are part of Spartan. And I know you've also written a book and have a TV show and all kinds of other stuff. Just tell us a little bit about Spartan, the company.
Sure. So let's go way back if that's okay.
Sure.
Back in the 70s, my mother left the Italian food, the Italian way in Queens, New York, and stumbled upon a health food store and was taught to meditate and do yoga. And for whatever reason, her Indian guru started a foot race in Queens that still exists today called the Transcendence Run. It's a 3,100-mile foot race around a 1-mile loop.
Wow.
So that caught my attention at a very young age. And I went on a traditional journey we all go on, tried to graduate college and get a career and made some money, found a beautiful bride, got married, had children. But deep down inside, I just didn't feel alive. I didn't feel great unless I was doing something really challenging, unless I was sweating and breathing heavy. So 23 years ago, in the middle of a race, it popped in my head that maybe I should do this as a business. It was actually a terrible idea because we're selling something. I was attempting to sell something that people really don't want. You know, if you think about our existence on the planet, for most of our existence, for most of that time, we've stayed alive by avoiding discomfort, by not falling off cliffs, by not freezing to death, right? By not melting out in the desert. And it's been a requirement for our species to continue. And it's only the last 80 years, 70 years with this tremendous advancement, if you want to call it that, where we're so cushy, we're so protected, right? We're so climate controlled that we need to go in the other direction. But we're still hardwired and soft wired to avoid it. So when you wake up in the morning, you don't believe me, when you wake up in the morning and you're about to go do your workout, you grab a cup of coffee. You try to read the latest news. You start swiping on Instagram. You do everything you can to avoid the workout subconsciously because that's dangerous. It's going to require you to expend energy. So here we are attempting to sell people something they're wired to avoid. They buy gym memberships. We buy gym memberships, right? We don't go to the gym. We don't go. If everybody that bought a gym membership showed up, the gym would be overrun. So that was the idea. It was a bad idea. It was a great idea in many ways to help change lives and get people to feel, optimal. But it was a bad idea from a business perspective. You're actually better off. You'll have the wind at your back if you're selling candy and handbags and cars.
Will people pay for pain is what your question was all those years ago.
I mean, listen, and again, I'm not Debbie Downer at all. I love what we do. I get paid in the greatest currency ever, which is lives being changed. But since this is a business marketing podcast, we're having that conversation. Think about the military. Think about the news. The U.S. military and its branches, the last few months, they can't get people to sign up to join the military. And they pay you, right? And they pay for college because it's hard and it's a commitment and it requires discipline. And maybe you have some, bad, I mean, there's other reasons too, but in general, it's hard. And so anyway, the idea was spawned in my brain in the middle of one of these crazy adventures I was on 23 years ago. And the first 10 years, I had to lie to people to get them to come. I had to tell them, hey, come up to our farm in Vermont. We're going to have a barbecue this weekend. It wasn't a barbecue, but I knew, like if I said to them, we're going to run 26 miles through the mountains, they weren't coming. So
not even if they're running to the barbecue at the end of the race.
It wouldn't matter. Like I've been doing this a long time. I've been around these kinds of races. Remember where I come from in Queens, a 3,100-mile race. I've been around this a long time. People, look, there's obviously a group of participants that do hard things, but when you look at 8 billion people, it's a very, very, very small segment. Should everybody be doing this? Absolutely, everybody should. If this was the 1700s and you and I were doing the podcast back then, I'd be saying we should be selling couches and penicillin and controlled rooms. But now everybody should be pushing towards the hard way. And so anyway, we built a house of brands. I'm a glutton for punishment. We built a house of brands, Spartan Trail, which is trail runs through the mountains. That might excite some people. The views are always incredible. Tough Mudder, another obstacle series of races around the world. DECA, which is a much cleaner version of what we do in gyms. Highlander, which is a hiking series where folks will hike, 60, 70 miles. And then there's a bunch of extreme endurance events that my board of directors, my investors say, what the hell are we doing those for? Because you really have to lie to people to get those people to come out. Death Race, La Ruta, toughest mountain bike race in the world, oldest mountain bike race in the world, M2O, toughest paddleboard race, ocean crossing in Hawaii in the world, world's toughest mudder, Agoge. Anyway, those are the Navy SEALs, the Delta Force of what we do. Very small segment of the population would ever go out and do something like that. But if you want to feel alive, if you want to find out what you're made of, boy, those events are incredible. And by the way, think about, I'm sorry, I'm just completely taking over, doing all the talking here. Think about somebody listening, think about yourself, myself. We go to visit some place. I went to visit Paris with my daughter a few months ago. I found out how to parent a daughter. You have to go to France, you have to have French fries, and you have to talk fashion. So we went to France. And I said, let's wake up at 6 a.m. Saturday morning. Wake up at 6 a.m. I said, yeah, we're going to run around France because that's the best way to see.
Yeah, see the city. Yeah.
And so my point is, if you're going to go on vacation, you could go somewhere. You could see it from a hotel. You could see it from a taxi cab. But oh my God, if you run it or bike it or trek across the Great Wall like we do, and you see places, you see the earth like no one sees the earth. So anyway, we found out that no one in France on Saturday wakes up until 10 a.m. So we had the entire
You got to see the empty city versus the full city after everybody woke.
It's unbelievable. All the photos they're just her and I, no traffic, no people.
Right. Well, that's excellent. So so in terms of the structure of the company, obviously you've got different types of experiences and races for different appetites for, how muddy somebody wants to get, how dirty somebody wants to get, how long somebody wants to go. If it's a really, really big and, ultra endurance race versus a little bit shorter. And I guess the idea is that there might be some kind of experience for everyone, not for everyone, but for many people.
Yeah, I mean, that's the idea. The idea is, again, doing this a long time, having to lie to people and tell them that they were going to a barbecue on my farm. I realized that you have to figure out how you're going to motivate that individual to do something they should be doing. And so it might be hiking piques their interest. It might be doing a gym event. DECA might pique their interest because they're not going to get muddy. They're not going to crawl under barbed wire, and they're going to be using equipment that they're used to seeing in the gym. For others that are feeling a little more adventurous, they'll come out to a ski resort and crawl under barbed wire for a mile in the rain, right? So the idea was to build a community of hard that becomes more hardened, make it global, and then inspire the rest of the world. We've had 10 million people do one of our events somewhere in the world. They tend to become addicted. Many of them get tattoos. They start to believe that they can do more than they currently do in life. And so whether they go out and start a business, they get back with their husband, back with their wife, they lose 60 pounds, they give up drugs, they give up drinking. I've had people say, they didn't kill themselves because
Wow.
literally they had a gun to their head. I had one guy
Wow.
and he remembered he had a race the next weekend. And I said, you now have a race every weekend with us. No
Right, right, right.
charge.
Well, I think also, speaking of vacations, part of the appeal of a vacation is not just being there in Paris, but also the planning and anticipation that goes into it. And I'm sure that that happens quite a bit for your events and your races, which is it's not about just the physical race and what you're doing there when you get there. It's about the prep and training that goes into it and the anticipation of it. And then it's almost like a cherry on top of the, not kind of a bad analogy, but cherry on top of the ice cream sundae to get to the race day where you actually get to experience the event. And you're going through it with other people who are like-minded and that, are looking for that same kind of experience that you are.
Well, it's a crazy paradox. We call it the Spartan paradox. Most people will say, can't do it. But when I get in shape and when I start eating healthy, then I'll do it. And the reverse is true, because if you were going to get in shape and you were going to start eating healthy, you would have done it already. When you put
Right.
a date on the calendar, you think about a boxer. There's a date on the calendar now. We have a fight in 90 days. The two women that are getting into that ring in 90 days, they start taking life really seriously. They're going to bed early, they're waking up early, they're not drinking, they're training hard. When somebody puts something challenging on their calendar, one of these events, their whole life changes. It doesn't
Right.
change before. I learned it very early, again, 40 years ago, that I had to keep putting events on my calendar in order to stay motivated to live this way. And then eventually it just becomes the way you live.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the other interesting thing, your audience, they're marketers and they run marketing businesses, I would assume.
Yeah. Yeah.
The greatest way, I ran a Wall Street trading firm. We had a lot of employees, we had a lot of customers, a lot of potential customers. The greatest way to recruit new customers, new employees, to keep everybody motivated, it's not golf, it's not drinking, it's not fancy lunches. It is doing hard together.
Mm.
The proverbial, right? Like two guys go to war together. They're in a fight, like they come back, they are bonded for life.
Yeah.
For one of the things you said, reasons you said, which is we talk about, if you and I, let's say, signed up for M2O, we're going to do the paddleboard race in Hawaii. Every single day from now till then, we're talking to each other. How'd you train? Did you swim? Did you see a shark this morning? Like we'd build an unbreakable bond before the event.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the event is maybe the final glue, the final glue. So I'm curious if there's a piece of advice that you wish you'd gotten really early on in your career, or maybe advice you would give somebody who's just starting out in a new marketing career.
Well, I would say, as I talk to you here, I'm thinking about our children. I have 4 children, and are they going to be leveled up in life? Right? We've made them hard for sure. They've done crazy physical things, but I guess my message would be, you're always selling. We are always selling. Again, whether I'm lying to you and telling you you're coming to a barbecue, right? On the phone, like there's no business unless you're selling. So you better be really comfortable talking to people. You better be working on a network all day, every day. You better understand the nuances of closing a sale, because if you're not good at it, I don't care how much AI or what you throw at it, you're not going to succeed.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I mean, we're all in sales, whether we realize it or not. I mean, my kids are in sales asking me for dessert after dinner, spouses are in sales trying to convince their significant other to watch a romantic comedy instead of an action movie, or vice versa. So we all are in sales, whether we realize it or not. I believe everybody has a superpower, and I'm curious what your superpower is.
My superpower is getting people to do what they don't want to do. I am amazing at getting people way outside their comfort zone, taking on challenges they would have never otherwise done.
That's awesome.
Great. I'm great.
So, well, and that is truly a superpower. I'm curious if there's some specific values that either you want to demonstrate to your team, or maybe you would even demand of people that would join your team.
Well, the values would be like, don't trade on your principles, don't compromise ever. That's hard to do. We just went through COVID. It's hard to do when you're running a business and you got to take care of people. Work relentlessly. Like I grew up in a neighborhood where whether you succeeded or like everybody worked hard, everybody hustled, and just do the right thing.
That's great. That's great.
Compromise, work like hell, and do the right thing.
I love it. So at Setup, we're matchmakers. We connect marketers with marketing agencies that can help them fill gaps and solve problems. And so we're not a marketing agency, and we're also not on the client side or the brand side. We're the matchmakers that help bring those folks together. And so I'm curious, have you worked with agencies at Spartan, and how do you work with agencies? What's the relationship been with marketing agencies?
We would love to talk to, I'd love to have 100 agency partners. And why would you want those, Joe? We have an audience. We have a 10 million person audience around the globe. And shockingly, it's the CMO of Home Depot. It's the mom who just gave birth and came, like, it's everybody. We are very much like an airport. You walk through an airport, it's every size and shape. That's what you see out there. And I have direct access to these 10 million people. This is the hardest thing they've ever done in their life. And you as a brand, as long as it's healthy and clean, it's a good product, you get to save them out there. So these agencies that you speak of, they all have clients. And if those brands want to reach people in their most vulnerable moments and change them, like I think about when I was doing crazy races myself, way beyond Spartan distances. Like if you were a brand, if you were a product that saved me at that moment, that like
all right, you pay anything for that product at that point, right?
Like I was willing to give my finger to a guy in exchange for a piece of beef jerky once, and I don't even like beef jerky.
Right. When your body's craving protein, you're happy to get it. Yeah. So are there certain functions or disciplines, particularly of marketing, that you feel should be in-house, that you all need to own within Spartan and the companies that are part of the subsidiaries? And are there certain functions that you really want to get outside perspective or outside expertise?
I think the biggest thing for outside expertise is that partners, like there's many partners. How do we not have FedEx or DHL or UPS as our shipping partner, right? How do we not have Caterpillar as our, excavation partner that's digging, like go down the list, Hilton or Marriott as a hotel partner. So if there's one place agencies could really help us, it's bringing those, and we don't need money from these partners. I take 8 million photos a year. Do you think a person crawling under barbed wire wants to look at that photo and share it with their friend? Like 8 million photos a year. How do we not have someone in the photo business as a partner?
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, look for partners for sure. Yeah. I'm curious if there's a campaign or a program or something that you ran that taught you a great deal, because either it was a flop and you learned something you really needed to learn from that, or it was a huge success that maybe you'd want to emulate again in the future.
I mean, one that comes to mind was Why I Race. We did a campaign around why people race, and many of them got teary-eyed, and we heard the stories that I mentioned earlier around, I lost weight, I got back with my husband, back with my wife, gave up drugs or drinking. And so that was a fun campaign that did really well. Surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, you could do a lot of work and pre-plan a campaign and it does okay at best. Once in a while you catch lightning in a bottle. Versus, I just tested this about 6 months ago, versus you just capture moments. And so we had a guy show up to our race on our farm in Vermont, the one I mentioned earlier, early death race. And that's a no-no. If you show up early, you start when you get there. I showed up a week early.
Oh God.
And it was the winter. And if you remember this past winter in the Northeast, there was a moment of like 30 below temperatures.
Oh gosh.
Quite some time. And we put him in a boat, and he stayed out in the boat for 5+ days. And we captured each day on a phone. for 12 seconds. And it was unbelievable what happened. I mean, 10 million views. Everybody wanted to see what
Wow.
this did. And so there was an example of like, it was not planned. There were no meetings and like, we just captured it on a phone. And so I would argue, you know, campaigns are good, right? Sit down, come up with them, draw them out. But I'm really a believer now in moments. Just capture those moments and then see where they go.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think there's something to be said, particularly for your business. I think the organic, ideas and the organic content like that is maybe even more powerful than something that would have been well curated.
Help me find a partner. Here's a good one. Help me find a partner where I can put a confessional booth on course.
Mm,
And at the worst moment, at the top of the mountain, you've been carrying the sandbag, you're dehydrated, and people will go in there for 10 seconds and probably just cry
yeah.
into a camera.
It reminds me of some of those shows like Naked and Afraid and things like that, where it's like, now you've been in your homemade lean-to for 21 days in the rain and with mosquitoes, and it's like it's a different conversation than at the beginning when you're super excited to be on this adventure.
No doubt, no doubt.
Excellent. Well, I want to finish things up with a couple of fun questions that are sort of rapid fire, that aren't necessarily related to marketing or anything. But the first is there a sports team or a book or a movie or a quote or a band that inspires you? And what is it about that thing that inspires you most?
A couple of books. The Endurance, about Sir Ernest Shackleton, who survived 2 years stuck in the ice, didn't lose a man. That's a great story. There's another book about Rowan, and I can't think of the name of it, but I'm sure it was written in the late 1800s, sold 35 million copies,
Wow.
It was written by Ron L. Hubbard's dad.
Huh.
And the story, hopefully I'll remember the name here in a second. The story is about a US president trying to avoid a war with Cuba.
Mm.
And he needs somebody to go to Cuba. But in the late 1800s, we don't have, it's called a message to Garcia.
Okay.
In the late 1800s, we don't have planes and trains and automobiles. And so this American president has people coming into his office and he says, look, I need you to bring this letter to Garcia in Cuba. Well, why am I doing it? Well, how far is it exactly? Well, am I gonna get mosquito repellent?
Right.
Finally, Rowan walks in, the hero, right? I got it, no problem, and fights his way to Cuba, alligators, swimming, whatever.
Yeah, right.
And what a great story. That's the story for our kids, for our colleagues, is just get it done.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think stories of overcoming great obstacles are always interesting, particularly for the types of people that are interested in your races. I think they probably would also be interested in overcoming obstacles. That's part of
Everybody
it.
should be, because life is one big
Yeah.
obstacle.
Yeah, right. So, okay, I'm curious, outside of your family and outside of, your business, the races, where do you find joy? Do you have any other hobbies that aren't related to those two?
I sound like the most boring person ever. I love watching my boys wrestle. I love watching my girls, 2 boys, 2 girls. I love watching them play soccer. But what I love about it is the grind. I love seeing them just work really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Kids are so much fun to me. We put on an annual death camp for branding, for anybody listening, on the farm in Vermont, where about 80 to 100 kids come each year. And we wake them up at 5 a.m. and they get in cold water and they carry rocks up the mountain. It's the anti-camp. There's nothing fun about it. But kids want to come and there's a waiting list. And I love it because the kids don't quit. They can't. They can't call mom. We've taken their phone. They have no money. They can't get and so they just naturally become tough and become resilient, fight through. So it's a lot of fun for me.
Well, and you brought up a point a couple of different times that I've talked about a lot. I have twin, girl boy twin, 13-year-olds, and I want my kids to skin their knees. over the course of their lives, skinning your knees builds resilience, and resilience builds better humans. And it sounds like that's part of the whole point, is do difficult things, do tough things, so that you are prepared for what's next. It's being constantly prepared. And to your point earlier, early evolution, we didn't need that because we were running and hunting and fighting and doing what we had to do to survive. But now we have couches and ice cream and penicillin and opium, and we have to now force ourselves to do difficult things so that we're prepared for life.
Yeah, and we curate difficult things. That's what we do.
Yeah, I love it. All right, my last question is kind of a simple one. Is there a brand that you've never worked with directly that you really admire, and what is it about that brand that you admire?
Any brand that's been around for a long time intrigues me, because I know how hard it is to run a business and then pass it on. And so if it's been around, Hearst is our partner, and so that's an amazing brand. They've been around forever. Apple, through its trials and tribulations, comes out the other side stronger than ever. But even a Caterpillar or any 100-year-old brand. A friend of mine owns Saks Fifth Avenue, which is owned by a parent company called Hudson Bay. I think it's been around since the 1400s or something.
Wow. Yeah.
That's just fun for me to think about. How did they hold that together that long?
Yeah. And also, to your point, for businesses that have been around a long, long time, they've certainly had to reinvent themselves, and talk about enduring hard things and tenacity. I mean, we just emerged out of dealing with COVID as a society, which was really difficult. But 100-year-old companies dealt with plagues and world wars and other things that were very difficult too. So it seems like that may be a constant theme in your life, is taking on difficult things and overcoming challenges builds more resilient and better humans. And I appreciate that. So I want to thank you. Joe De Sena is the founder and CEO of Spartan. Also, the book. I want to just mention the book really quickly as well. So you just published a book. Can you give us the name and where we can?
A bunch of books: Spartan Up,
Okay.
Spartan Way, Spartan Fit. You're seeing a theme here: the word Spartan. Yeah. So feel free to grab a book, and feel free to shoot me an email, joe@spartan.com. I'm easy to get to, maybe too easy. You can come to the farm anytime you want. It's not going to be a barbecue. You're going to be the one that gets barbecued.
Right. Be prepared. Just come be prepared to do hard.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for the time, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.